Okay, so now let's look at this client and server, these terms. You might have heard a lot these terms client and server. Let's look at in detail that what do these mean. So clients and servers are nothing but simply computers connected to the internet. That's it. But then my mobile phone is also connected to the internet. Is that a server? No, that is not. So there's a difference, right, between client and server. A client is a user device, which is connected to the internet, which means that you connect it to the internet, you might disconnect it at any time. So the first thing is that it is not permanently connected to the internet. That is first thing, right? Second thing is that when you are connecting it to the internet, you are connecting it via some ISPs, right? Internet service providers, we call it. Let's say Geo Fiber or whatever. Now, if you connect through those, we will discuss it later. They don't have a fixed, they will not give you a static IP address or something, right? Because of that, it cannot be used as a server, right? We'll discuss that in detail later, but just that this is a separate type of internet connection with which you are connected, right? On the other hand, the connection of server with internet is different type, right? It is a fixed address will be allocated. We'll discuss that about IP addresses, but so that the all the requests can be mapped properly through a domain name, that I know that all the requests coming through this domain name will be going to this computer, and I can statically decide that thing, right? But more importantly, it is always running, right? It never shuts down, right? If I want Google result now or sometime later, the Google server has to run always, right? Because it is a server and its purpose is to serve its customers whenever they want to, right? So it has to always keep on running. Now, what does a server keep? A server keeps on the internet, keeps some website data, files. It can host some web services. It can have proper API services. It can do some computation and return you the results. So these things can be done on the server. Now, one thing I want to highlight here is that when we say that okay, the client is talking to the server, what does that mean? Is the client talking? No, actually client means what? Our device, right? Is our device talking? No, actually there is an application on our device which is a browser, right? Let's say now that browser is talking. So and similarly on the server, when we say that okay, server has responded with this thing, what does that mean? Like there are many things running on the client, browser is one of them. Similarly, there are many things running on the server, and a web server is one of them. So the actual applications interacting between client and server are actually browser and web server. Web server is the application running on the server, browser is an application running on client. And we'll see later this in the course that HTTP, which is like the connection, let's say HTTP request you are sending from client to server, whatever. This HTTP is an application level protocol, which means that two applications will communicate with each other, and that and those two applications are browser and web server, right? Now, what is client, right? Client will be like, if this is the internet and let's say some devices are connected, then the end points, right, the leaves, you can understand it like leaves of the tree. So this device is connected and anytime it can get disconnected, again get connected, but the point is that these things which are connected, in the end they are clients. Let's go detail. So for example, this computer is connected to the internet, but okay, where is the server? Okay, so this whole cloud is just a abstraction of that thing, that servers are inside. Here is a detailed diagram where I can see that okay, actually servers are connected to the internet, servers are part of the internet only, and all those devices, our devices, user devices, which gets connected to the internet, their requests go via internet. Internet, you can understand it like just a mesh of computers. So one of the computers is the server, let's say, which on which, let's say, I want to query google.com, and google.com data is, let's say, here, right? Then the client will request that thing, and that request will go here, right? And it will again come back with the response, and that response will be visible on our screen, right? So let's zoom in on a bit. I'm meaning this, that if there is a client, it makes a request to the server, and then server comes with a response. Now you can simply understand here that it's not that simple, right? That there can be a lot of computers, lots of things in between, but a simplified approach is this thing, that a simplified diagram, we can say that we request and we get the response. There are n number of things going inside here, right? It's like, okay, I ordered pizza from Domino's and it came. So you ordered it, it came. It looks like very simple, right? But there can be 10 things, 20 things happening, like logistics, the delivery boys, the packaging, like the maintenance, the accounting, the like auditing, the payment. There can be n number of things going internally, right? But for us, it looks like a very simple thing, right? So we will go into that detail, that for the case of HTTP request, what are these internal things which keep on going, right, inside a request, that we'll go into it later. But the simplistic view is this thing, that we are trying to do a request, we are trying and then we will get a response in turn of that request. Okay, next we'll see that what is a web server. A web server is actually an application running on a server which is responsible for serving website resources, right? So here, for example, the resources for the website which I want to connect, let's say that is stored here. Then the web server on this server, the web server is what? An application running in this server, is responsible for serving those website resources. Now, web servers can be of many types. One of the simplest types is called HTTP server, right? It is actually a static server. What does that mean? It means that it just serves the file present on the server as it is. It cannot modify anything. Like, it just sees that, okay, index.html, it is there in a server, I will give you. About.html, if it is there, I will give you. If it is not there, I will give you, throw you an error. As simple as that, right? It does not do anything of its own. There's a special set of, let's say, 100 files are there. If you request those 100 files, it will give you. If it is not there, it will throw in that. As simple as that, right? So the first thing it has to do, basic requirements of a web server, in particular, let's say HTTP server, will be that it has to understand that what is HTTP protocol, what are URLs built using those HTTP protocols, right? Now, if it understands that, then it knows that, okay, which file is requested and which file I have to return back. That is, so basically, static web server will consist of a server computer, like the hardware, right? On top of that, this HTTP server is the sort of a web server, right? The whole thing is called a static web server, right? So you can understand already that it is confusing. Server is sometimes used for hardware, sometimes it is used for software. So yeah, it is used for both. You have to understand the context in which it is being used, and we have to understand correspondingly. Okay, now this is one type of web server, static web server, where there's a browser, it does a request. There's the HTTP server, which is always running, always listening. When you ask for a file, it sees that whether that file is there or not, and then if it is there, it responds with that file. That's it. But it does not have any application logic. It does not has its own brain or something. It just serves the static files. That's it. But in contrast, there are other types of servers called dynamic web servers, right? So can you imagine that Google serves how many pages, right? Google serves billions of pages. Do you think that Google has those billions of pages already? No, right? It actually generates it on the fly. As you need, your content is served as per your request on the fly. There is no such page already there, but when you requested, that page was created in time, right? So that is what a dynamic web server is. It consists of a static web server. So obviously, static things, static web server is like the basic support mechanism of URLs, HTTP. Those things will be already there. But on top of that, there is an application server. By application server means that some, let's say, some programming language support will be there. Let's say Java, Node, which will be like JavaScript. So some programming language, so that this programmatically dynamic content can be created, can be generated and served. That is the purpose of a dynamic web server. Now, websites that serve such a dynamic content are called dynamic websites, right? So, for example, uh, the Google website, right? That is a dynamic website. The Flipkart website, right? It is a dynamic website because you know that all the pages are not already there, right? Some things are there in the database, or as you query, as you click on something, those things come and dynamically those pages are generated. However, there are some pages can be which can be static. For example, let's say you create some portfolio page for your profile, for your professional profile, right? And it has 5 pages, and you deployed those pages online, right? Then like only those pages are there, right? Last time when we saw like about Google example, right? It also looks like a static page because okay, these 5 6 7 pages are there, and all these pages are already defined, and when I click, then that page opens. Like it looks like a static website, right? There's not much dynamic going on here, right? So now you understand the difference between dynamic website and a static website. So this is a overview of it, that the client and server, when they interact, actually the browser and web server is interacting, and the browser can be anything, let's say Chrome, Firefox, whatever, and the web server can also be anything. It can be a static web server, like there is something called Apache HTTP server, that is an example of static, but there can be dynamic web servers, right? For example, Node.js, Express.js is just a sort of a package library on top of which makes building APIs and building servers simpler. But Node.js and Express.js in combination, that is an example of dynamic web server. You can create dynamic content on the fly. Apache Tomcat, it is a dynamic application web server for Java language. So you can see that these things are examples of static and dynamic web servers, and these are browsers, right? So now you have a pretty good idea about web servers. Now we'll see that what a router is. Okay, so a router is a device that routes or relays a message sent from a given computer to the correct destination computer. So when earlier there was a image of cloud, and there's two computers connected, but right, the next computer can be miles away, right? How and there can be a mesh of networks. How we know that which wire to go, where to go, right? That is where router comes in, right? Router tells us that okay, this is the message, and this is how it should be relayed. In this wire it should be relayed so that it reaches the correct destination computer. So and more importantly, there can be multiple routers, right? There can be hundreds of routers, or at least 10 20 routers between your request and the server, right? Which means that a router can also pass the message to another router, then another router will again pass the message to another router. Let's say there is a mesh of routers also, right? So I'm just giving an idea that how the internet will try to handle your request, right? Apart from that, apart from participating in the routing strategy, so you can understand, if there is a mesh of network, then different routes can be taken by the routing strategy, which is decided by the router. Okay, there is also called congestion control. So let's say there are 3 paths going to a particular server, but one path is like very like there's a sort of a traffic jam there. The traffic jam is because of which, because of let's say too many packets are there, right? And because of that there is a congestion in that, right? So that congestion can be avoided if you choose another route, right? And then router, if the router is aware of those congestions, then it can speed up your website, because it will reroute it to to a different path, and then you can fetch the website quickly. So routers can also control the congestion in the network. So it is something like this, right? This client is server, and then there are routers, and again this is simplified, that okay, in this side there is one router, in this side there is one router, but within the internet there can be like 5-10 more routers, right? And one router to another router to another router, and like you understand, like finally the nearest router gets, let's say, the packet, and then it is delivered to the server, and again back and forth, right? So basically the router is, we can clearly understand, it is a very critical piece when we are trying to do a request response cycle with respect to the communication between client and the server.